thing to do. Goldman dealt with only the biggest companies in corporate America, or with super wealthy individuals, typically those with $10 million or more to invest with the firm. More than that, this was a firm that had a reputation for screwing just about any company, clients included, when business was on the line. Goldman, of course, would deny that assertion. Even so, in the normal course of business, a bank like Shore Bank, with its modest funds and do-gooder reputation, wouldn't even appear on Goldman's radar as a potential customer. Yet for some seemingly inexplicable reason, Lloyd Blankfein, who had a net worth close to $500 million and until recently had never heard of Shore Bank, started imploring his friends at other firms like Morgan Stanley, GE Capital, and others to help this little bank. Note that Blankfein suggested there was money to be made here. Quite the contrary. It was simply the right thing to do. To any casual observer, this puzzling scenario raises the question, why would Blankfein possibly want to save Shore Bank? First, a little background. For Blankfein, it had been a good year, at least on paper. Goldman earned more than $13.4 billion in 2009, and now, nearly midway through 2010, the firm was well on its way to a repeat performance. But with success came a lot of controversy. Goldman, the most profitable firm on Wall Street and among the most profitable firms in corporate America, had become the poster child for the inequalities of the American economy that followed the financial collapse of 2008. That collapse was the result of a combination of government policies, reckless risk-taking, and sheer greed. The big financial firms, including Goldman, created literally trillions of dollars worth of debt products based on mortgages that were given to people who couldn't afford them, for houses that were way overpriced. When the housing market collapsed, the firms were left with tons of toxic housing debt on their balance sheets. One by one, they started to go under. First, Bear Stearns was rescued by the government, and then Lehman Brothers was allowed to fail. Following Lehman, the other firms, including Goldman, which had been in relatively better shape, but were by no means healthy, were now in the market's crosshairs. At that point, the government, which at the time was being run by Republican President George W. Bush, but would shift entirely to the Democrats when Barack Obama was elected president the following year, realized a true collapse of the entire financial system was a distinct possibility, and stepped in to bail out the remaining firms. Like the rest of Wall Street, Goldman had benefited from a bailout, funded entirely by taxpayer dollars, to survive. Yet since then it had used a number of special privileges created by the Bush administration to help the big banks in the aftermath of the financial crisis to make more money than ever before. The profits of the big banks began rolling in just weeks after the 2008 bailout. Yet the government support continued through 2009 and into 2010 as the programs remained firmly in place under the Obama administration. These included, among other perks, guarantees on the firm's debt, super low interest rates set and then left untouched by the Fed, changes in accounting rules that allowed the firms to create profits out of losses, and maybe, most of all, the notion that the remaining banks, backed up as they were by the federal government, were too big to fail. In a desperate attempt to save the economy from total collapse, the government did for a handful of banks what the mob does for its highest, most important criminals. It made them, in effect, made men. This policy, known as too big to fail, asserted that some firms, including many of those responsible for the credit crisis, should not be allowed to collapse for fear that, if they did, the entire economy would follow. It was an unprecedented assortment of government goodies that allowed Wall Street to survive, and, after the initial threat of collapse had waned, thrive. They all made out like, for lack of a better word, bandits. Even lowly Citigroup, after 2 rounds of federal bailouts, was profitable early in 2009, so much so that its CEO, Vikram Pandit, who was nearly pushed out as head of the firm a few months later, found job security and a second chance. But Goldman was the most adept at gaming this no-lose